I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. All right. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have an awesome panel today. We're going to get started off talking about third parties and Cornel West or bust. So I'm interested in hearing their opinions. Kit will be joining us, I think, a little bit later. I think he had tech issues a couple minutes ago. But I want to start out by letting everyone introduce themselves. Let's go ahead and start off with Delilah.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me on your show again, Sabby. I'm Delilah Barrios. I ran for governor on the Green Party ticket 2022. So we're just getting ready for 2024 now.
All right. And Chuck.
Yeah, listen, Sabby, first of all, thank you for having me. You've been doing some incredible work, and particularly some of your interviews with Dr. West and clarifying some misconceptions. It's great to be here. I'm a journalist. I do some sports writing, but I like to cover the movements on the ground and like to speak from that perspective. And right now, I'm dialing in from Atlanta at the Stop Cop City Week of Action. So I'm learning a lot this week.
Awesome. So I'm sure everyone knows by now, Dr. West has decided to run for president through the Green Party. And then also Dr. Jill Stein is actually, it appears, is going to be his campaign manager, which I think is really huge considering she's run for president before with the Green Party. So she knows what to expect running as a third party candidate. I want to start with you, Delilah. Like, how do you feel about Dr. West's decision to run third party?
Oh, I'm just relieved that he did because I didn't feel very hopeful, honestly, with our other prospects. So I'm really grateful that that we've maintained ballot access for so long in so many states that he really does have a chance of winning the presidency. And I think that it's going to be really good to see people turn out for third party in ways that we haven't seen before.
Awesome. Chuck, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I'm really excited. It's the first time in almost my memory that I'm so politically aligned with a candidate. I first publicly met Dr. West on the campaign trail in 2014 at a Free Palestine rally. Now, I want to repeat what I just said. At 2014 at a Free Palestine rally. That is career suicide. Public figure there, and if you remember, there were massacres going on. At that point, you advanced your career by talking bad about Palestinians, by saying they're human shields. So to have someone who would speak truth to power and has been very consistent, I've seen him in Standing Rock, I've seen him, interviewed him twice in Ferguson. He has been interviewed him in Charlottesville. There's no public figure that exists who is out with the protests. And it's not, he doesn't go to the ones where everyone's already there. He goes to the ones that need attention. So his very presence and celebrity will bring that. So as someone who covers the on the ground movements, I don't think I would ever, see something like that where I would be so aligned with the people in general and human rights.
All right. Well said, Chuck. Kit, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then if you'll answer that question as well, how do you feel about Dr. West running third party? Oh, we can't hear you. Yeah, I think you're muted. Yeah, you're still muted. That's okay. Maybe I'm not sure if you have your mic connected in StreamYard. But sometimes it works if you hop off and log back on. StreamYard is weird like that sometimes. Yeah, give that a whirl. Okay, so here's something that I wanted to play because it's very obvious. We've seen what happened to people like Bernie Sanders running through the Democratic Party. We saw how the DNC treated him in 2016 and in 2020. I don't know if you have seen this, but this was recent. Now, RFK Jr. actually had a meeting in New Hampshire. It's called Conversation with the Candidate. And I'm so glad that this woman asked this question. So I want to go ahead and play the question that she said. This is really, oh, wait, I think that was already lined up. Sorry. Whoopsie. I don't know why I did that. Okay, here we go. Listen to this. I hope I got it right. Yeah.
Having the courage and backbone to tell the American voters the truth. And hopefully you will be able to heal the divide. My question is, many former registered Democrats are hesitant to rejoin the party to vote for you, given the past history of the DNC. This year, they have already stated Biden is the candidate for the ticket. What would you say to these voters? How can you fight an entity that can decide what candidate will be on the ballot, regardless of what voters wanted?
Well, what I would say is, the voter has a choice. You can come out to the poll and you can support somebody who is not the DNC's choice. And I agree with you. We're living in a time in American history where.
And I have to pause it there because he gets into like the whole January 6th thing. We can't be playing that on here. But I wanted to say, notice the question that she was just asking him. She said, like, the Democratic Party has already said that Joe Biden is going to be the candidate. Now, RFK Jr. is telling people, well, you can still, come out and vote for me. But even he has acknowledged how corrupt the DNC is. And I want to hear from both of you. When we think about like something like what Cornel West is doing, there's been a lot of criticism from people saying like he should be running through the Democratic Party. But you just heard what she just said and how RFK feels about like the Democratic Party. And I'm going to show you something else that Marianne Williamson said as well, because I think this is important too. Marianne tweeted this. She said, when our campaign reached out to groups of high school Democrats of America, they were contacted by their national board telling them they could not engage with any candidates other than President Biden. So you see, it's already happening. So she said, really teaching the kids about democracy, huh, guys? So how do you guys feel about that, about how the DNC just basically, they do what they feel is best and they go against what the American people want?
If I may just go ahead, I think that everybody's tired of this game. You know what I'm saying? Everybody who's criticizing anybody going against Biden on the Democratic ticket is so spineless and unprincipled because they know already where the interests are. And it's with the military industrial complex. It's with, big pharma industries like that. And so, honestly, I don't know how they hold conversations with people face to face where they're willing to say, well, it's important that we're having these conversations. No, the conversation isn't important as far as political parties is going. Like, that's not the only thing that we're supposed to do here. As a previous politician, it's not just like, oh, well, I want to promise this, or I believe in this, or my beliefs are this. It's not about that. Like, people need to see real change, and the Democratic Party as a whole has been a complete and abject failure. And I think about like, oh, if Hillary had won, if Jill Stein had won, I do not think that our country would be in as great turmoil as it is right now. And so that's what I want people to consider. It's like, it's really a waste of your energy and your time working for these, candidates who are just going to bow down to the establishment. They're just going to endorse Biden at the end anyway. I mean, we're all tired of the charade. So I just think, I don't know how you have those conversations with people where you're trying to seem truthful and principled at all.
Chuck, how do you feel about that?
Well, listen, I'm a reformed liberal, okay? I'm not a long-time person who advocated for green. I didn't have revolutionary parents or anything. I learned from history. I campaigned for Obama. I did. When he said we're going to close Gitmo on day one, I believed him. When he said that we would end the war in Iraq, I didn't think that meant move the troops to other places and have more troops elsewhere. I have to be able to look at the receipts that have come in, not just Obama, but since, and make adjustments. That's the situation that happened to Bernie and how they all colluded after he took the lead, and people dropping out, Klobuchar dropping out, and Buttigieg dropping out, and they all ganged up on him. This is not democracy. We know what it was. And when Bernie had as great a chance as possible, they stonewalled him. And I didn't even get to the media component as well as we're having swastikas. That wasn't the story. It wasn't even a one-day story. We were talking how mean Bernie supporters were online, while literal swastika flags were at his rallies. We skipped that. Now, if Barack Obama was president and there were swastika rallies, we would see it, and rightfully so. We absolutely should see it. So we have to be able to learn from history, and when we learn from it, informs the present. So here we are. There's no evidence that we have that you could run as Democrat and go far and not get blocked. So he chose a different party, chose the Green Party, and I think the electoral lens is only one of many lenses, and we can speak about that in a little bit, but I think it's somewhat myopic to just come in to say, well, if he wins. Opportunities here, there's mobilizing opportunities here on important issues, and I'll be happy to speak on that. But listen, if you really think the Democratic Party, you could win through that route, you have not been paying attention.
Well said. Chuck, I think you may want to unhook your Bluetooth. I think there may be a little bit of static, but I'm going to go up to
We're going to do that then.
You in just a second, Delilah. Let me try to see if Kit, can you do a test?
Hi, I am very, very, very sorry for this. Apparently, tech gremlins like to play around, especially at the last minute. There is a storm that's brewing out here in Chicago, so maybe that's playing around. But hello, everyone. Sorry for being late. My name is Kit Cabela. I'm the host of Hard Lens Media. We're live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Central on YouTube, Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, and Twitch. Now, here's the situation, how I feel about Dr. Cornel West, especially throwing his hat in the campaign ring. It is something that was long overdue and something we need to see in 2020. Already now, we're seeing the massive wave of voter suppression and censorship and people saying that third-party candidates are a threat. The real truth is third-party candidates are not a threat. They are actually a voice of the voiceless. 50% of Americans are identifying themselves as independent. 50% of Americans are tired of voting for the two-party system. And already when you have people like Pod Save America saying it's okay to voter shame and yell at people, it is up to us now to push back against the system. Now, the challenge for a third-party candidate, especially to be on the ballot and on the debate stage, will be monumental because there are many states that are draconian towards Greens, Libertarians, or Independents. Our job now, as commentators, as people reporting on the news, and everybody that's watching, it is our social responsibility to break away from that neoliberal narrative and bullying. And I'm going to say that again. It's bullying that's going to be happening towards us, and we have to push back. Nothing has fundamentally changed under Joe Biden. It's gotten worse, and we already know what to expect from a Republican administration. It's our job now to call for a new movement, and Dr. Cornel West's campaign can be that, but he has to be aggressive, unapologetic, and treat corporate media for what it is, as well as a two-party system, the enemy.
Well said, Kit. How do you guys feel about the fact that as soon as Dr. West announced, it seemed like right out of the gate, mainstream media covered it, which we're not used to seeing that in reference to third-party candidates. To me, it kind of speaks to the fact that something that I've been kind of saying for a while, we need someone to run third party with a big name, someone that is well known. This could have been Jesse Ventura in 2020, but that didn't work out. We've talked about that before on the show. But now we see the difference. So the narrative that we've been given before, where people have said that you can't run third party because you're not going to get any attention from mainstream media. Now we see if you're a big name, that's not necessarily obviously the case. And Cornel West has been on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. He's been on all of these mainstream media outlets since he announced. So how do you guys feel about that, about the coverage that he's getting?
I think it's, again, I think it's a positive thing. He's no stranger to, media. He's no stranger to answering hard questions. He's no stranger to aligning with political movements that are really important. So I think it's really wonderful. Now, Green Party, for instance, in the past, like my threshold was $50,000 to be on stage for a debate. So it's definitely a monetary setback. You know what I'm saying? Because people are going to say, oh, if you donate to him and you help third party candidates, we're definitely going to get Trump. And it's like, he's just as bad as Biden. I mean, they're both equally horrible in my opinion. So it's just, I'm again, I don't want to overuse the word. I don't want to say I'm being too hopeful, but it is good that they really can't say, oh, we're not going to platform this guy, because they had no problem platforming him before. And so they'll really have to eat their words, at this moment, if they fail to recognize him and what he's doing. So, for now, I'm loving this. I think it's great. So make everybody else uncomfortable,
How do you feel, Chuck?
I agree with Delilah's point. Before I give my comment, I want a point of clarity. Did you have to get 15% to get on that debate stage? Can you verify that for me?
I actually don't know right now.
It's 15% for third party.
Okay. You need to get 15% in the media to be acknowledged, just to even be on the debate stage, and overall above 5%, ideally for a third-party candidate, to be recognized federally, so it can be federally funded. That's something the Greens and Libertarians will have to do, especially at the end of this election cycle. But I don't mean to cut you off, because I think you're next.
Well, listen, I think those are important points, okay? So there are three levels to this. There's the can you win level, which will dominate. And I'll just say it's never been more ripe for a third-party candidate, because Biden has such a low approval rating. Trump has such a low approval rating. Throw your data about third parties out the window for the last, 200 years, because you've never had two candidates so monumentally disliked, even within their own party. And then you don't have the third party candidate so well known and liked. So it's right to make some movement. But even if you don't make that movement, let's talk about the 5%. If you get to at least the 5%, you get to grow a Green Party. Isn't that what we want to do? We want to grow a party for the long run, at the minimum of 5%. But then let's look at 15%. And this is the media person in me talking. We want to mobilize around issues, however they come to fruition. I'm here in Atlanta. They're having a Stop Cop City week. I've only heard one candidate on stage say, and in interviews say, I am for Stop Cop City. I'm against what they're doing. I've only heard one candidate say, Free Palestine, a taboo topic to talk about in the public sphere. If he's on that stage, they can't avoid it. He's going to say Free Palestine, and he's going to say, what's your opinion as well, and hold your feet to the fire. If you want to hear about Medicare for all, then you want him on that stage. You want to hear about reparations, you want to hear him on that stage. So he can advance these issues that activists have been working on but can't get in the limelight. And whatever happens afterwards, we could keep pushing those issues till they come to fruition and policy at some later date.
Kit, what's your take on how the media is already covering Cornel West's announcement?
Well, they're already vilifying him. Fox News, of all places, the only place that's actually kind of giving him a fair shake. But mind you, again, Fox News has its bias, especially because, it's the left fighting the left. No. First of all, do not associate us with the third part, with the Democratic Party, the liberal establishment. Already we're seeing articles saying that Dr. Cornel West will help out Donald Trump, or Dr. Cornel West will be a pain for Biden. Well, it's not my fault that the Biden-Harris administration were incapable and unwilling to follow through with any of their promises. It's not my fault that Bernie Sanders' good friend decided to screw over working-class citizens. And it is not my fault that the Democratic Party is in bed with Wall Street, big banks, and corporations. So for all these people that are crying and screaming, saying, oh, no, you're supporting third parties, yeah, I'm doing it. Purposely, number one, I have a vindictive sense to this. I want to see you cry, because you're going to bat for Jim Crow Joe Biden, who's been on the wrong side of history. Personally, I've seen this not happen once, but twice now, 2016 and 2020, where third parties are vilified. Third parties are viewed as spoiler candidates because everyone's suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Donald Trump is the rash indicating something's wrong with body politics. People like Joe Biden, they are the cancer and the virus that is crippling what used to be our republic, not anymore, because we live in an oligarchy. So I invite and welcome the liberal tears crying in, saying, oh no, what are you doing? Well, I can't help it if you have somebody who's a orange clown live rent-free in your head. It's not my fault that you're incapable for holding the Democratic Party accountable for their actions. What I'm going to do is go to a candidate that's going to fight for my values and, number one, earn my vote. Third-party candidates are not spoiler candidates. What they are is a symbol of truth and, two, options for voters to vote for. And I'm rather getting sick and tired of the liberal establishment media trying to say to voters, you need to think this way because freedom. That's not the job of the media. That's not the job of the press. The press is supposed to inform people, not tell us what to do. So when I hear corporate media vilify Dr. Cornel West, that once again reestablishes a correct fact. The media works for the owners and the donors of the two-party system. So I won't vote for them. And if that causes people to suffer from trauma and mental scarring and so much more, fine. But don't blame me for the failure of a system that's been going on long before I was born. I don't owe these politicians anything. These politicians, they don't like us. They don't think about us. They don't respect us. So I am not going to think about them. And I don't care about their feelings. And I'm not going to respect them, all the while the Democrats and Republicans are doing insider trading. So here's to, again, my vote going towards the Greens. And if that's the case, so be it. And if the Greens aren't on the ballot, if something does happen, I'll vote Libertarian. And if it isn't a Libertarian, it'll be Independent. But I won't be wasting my time or my energy on Democrats or Republicans. And I encourage everyone watching this live stream to be a free thinker as well and to vote for a party or a member who's not associated with the DNC or RNC. It is our social right to vote for whoever we want. And I don't owe the media any explanation.
That's right. So I'm going to go to you, Delilah, because he is running through the Green Party. Now, there is a little bit of a rift with the fact that there is that Howie Hawkins faction of the Green Party. And I know we've talked about this before, but there are some that are not too happy with the fact that someone like Cornel West, who is a big name, is coming to run through the Green Party and is getting a lot of attention, whereas Howie Hawkins has ran before and was not receiving that same amount of attention. Now, my argument would be that some of Howie Hawkins' policies I can't get down with. I can't get down with the rhetoric that he has in reference to this war with Russia and Ukraine. I can't get down with the Russiagate rhetoric that he has either. So I think he's just going in a different direction than the Green Party that I'm familiar with. What do you think about that, Delilah, being that you've run through the Green Party and there does seem to be a little bit of a split there between the people that support like Howie Hawkins and the other members of the Green Party?
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and state I am a co-chair of the state party in Texas, and our treasurer is actually already announced like a month ago that she's working with Cornel West's team because we want to, we need to give him the best that we can. He needs the best shot possible. And so I think a lot of people are offended because they think that we've already said we're going to, support him and things like that. We have a process to vote for our candidates, and I don't think that the Howie Hawkins section is as great as they think they are. Unfortunately, he hasn't been a very popular candidate, and he's not able, for reasons that you listed, but other reasons too. Me personally, I really did not like his campaign manager. I really did not like a lot of the reactionary beliefs and conversations that people had on the national level. I mean, I can get into conversations with people who've been longtime Greens and they're like, well, I just don't like the word socialism. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a personal problem. We still run democratically, you know what I'm saying? And we encourage these debates. We encourage these discussions because everybody should feel included in our processes. But yeah, I don't think that it's going to be as much of a rift as people think. I think that everybody, if they are aligned with the Green Party and they want to be with us and, really make some headway in this country, yeah, they're going to have to just express how they feel, deal with their feelings, and continue with the process that we have laid forth, because that's the only thing we're going to do. There's nothing that's changing just because Cornel West is running. It's just people are more excited than they were before. And if that personally stings, I think it's time to reevaluate why instead of blaming it on.
Yeah, and I'll
You know.
tell people too, for people who are not aware, the Green Party does have a primary, just
Yeah.
FYI, for people who are not aware of that. Chuck, what's your take on that? Do you think that will be an issue for Dr. West?
Running on the green? Is that what you're
Mhm.
saying? I mean, no, and then we have to take a step back for a second and just analyze the Biden presidency, pouring money into the military. Let's say we forgot all about that. Over $100 billion into the military. Let's say we forgot that he's raised the ICE budget under him. Forgot all about that. Let's forget that we had a 2020 uprising in every part of the country, including DC, where I live, and after George Floyd, and he gets up on the State of the Union and says, fund the police 3 times, and then goes forth and does so by the tune of $100 million, $100 million, and then it is resembling a Josh Hawley amendment, which came out a year earlier. And so we see this type of unity between Republicans and Democrats. I always say about Biden that when Trump speaks, the white supremacy comes right out of his mouth. With Biden, the white supremacy comes right out of his budget. And we have to look a little bit closer at those budgets that are really harming people. And when you do that, that's bad enough. But if we forgot all that, this man has a 35% approval rating. And so what you're saying is, someone who went against every single thing that progressives and leftists wanted. We were told push Biden to the left. The opposite has happened. And then on top of all that, it's not even the general election. You don't even want to primary him. You don't even want, you're saying Biden has done such a good job, despite a 35% approval rating and all of that, that we don't even think he deserves to be primaried. That is a rotten, rotten party to the core, if that's the best you could come up with. So the greatest threat to Joe Biden winning is Joe Biden running.
Well said, Chuck. Kit?
So can you please repeat the question one last time? I apologize.
Do you think this will be an issue with Cornel West running through the Green Party, considering there's like the Howie Hawkins faction of the Green Party that some of them they've made some comments on Twitter feeling like they don't feel like it's fair?
Thank you again. I just wanted to clarify that question. So here's the thing. It will be an issue, and I'm going to explain why. As much as I'm a supporter of third parties, we have to be very critical of their actions and lackluster movements, okay? And I say this as constructive criticism towards the third party movement. This goes for Greens and Libertarians. First, let me focus on the Greens. We all remember the aftermath of 2016. That was an ample time for the Greens and any independent or third-party movement to really start building infrastructure to be ready for the next election cycle. There was, and it's still growing now, but it was ample to do it then, but the ink's already dry, to establish something that could be ready for the 2020 election cycle. Whatever arose during those 4 years was under the mismanagement of the Greens, and Howie Hawkins has been an influential member of the Green Party, and there is a faction there. Now, Nico House and the Convo Couch have done a phenomenal job in covering election integrity and having the receipts for a lot of events. Case in point, the Green Party 2020 primary. There's no denying that a lot of people were not a fan of Howie Hawkins, and it can be argued that what we saw in the Democratic primary, especially in 2016 and in 2020, happened in the Green Party of 2020 as well. The Green Party as a whole could have been doing a lot more. On an unrelated subject, when I did a follow-up to a documentary series called Toxic City Tour, we covered an individual who's covering these large industrial pollutants that were contaminating, and still are to this day, Lake Michigan and the air and soil and communities around that area. A lot of those activist groups, we covered them, including the Indiana Green Party between 2016 and 2020. As soon as Biden gets elected in office, everybody, including those Indiana Green Party chapters, disappeared. There, especially here in Illinois, at one point, the Green Party was recognized legitimately here in my state up until 2010. In 2010, the Illinois Green Party lost its status as being recognized as an official third party. This has to deal with management. This has to deal with people who are organizing that said system. And if you have people who are indifferent or are lack in an inspiring presence, that's going to trickle on down to state level chapters. So the thing is, Howie Hawkins does have a monopoly and influence in his party, and it will be kind of on the defense. I'll be surprised if they don't try and push back towards Dr. Cornel West, because Cornel West, unlike Howie Hawkins, can actually get results and build a large coalition. And if he truly has Chris Hedges, Jill Stein, and let's say Kshama Sawant and a few other groups come in, well, that's the end of the reign of Howie Hawkins, and I don't think he's going to take that too lightly. So we have to remember the Greens could have done something more before 2024, but they didn't. And that should be very concerning for a lot of people. And I hope Dr. Cornel West's campaign will be ready to deal with any kind of pushback within the Greens, because every time I've interviewed people, especially between 2017 and in 2020, when it comes down to getting the Green Party done or getting it activated, especially in Illinois, afterwards, people really didn't have a plan. There wasn't really an initiative to try and get things done. And that concerns me. And I hope that West and his campaign will be ready. I know this is a grilling subject to say towards the Greens, but at least from my perspective here in Indiana and in Illinois, it's been lackluster. And probably the reason why it's been lackluster is because they don't get anything from the top, and that is from the main branch of the Green Party. And if you have people who don't care about their job or keep on doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results, and that's zero.
These are all good points, Kit. Thank you so much for saying that, because otherwise, I've told you this multiple times before, you have to want to win. Like, you have to want to win, whether you're a Green Party, Libertarian Party, or whatever. Like, you really have to give it your all. And you're correct that, like, after, Biden won, or after, Trump won in 2016, it's just like, it seems like the energy just kind of dies away. Like, you still have to be fighting. Otherwise, this just seems like a political club, or it seems like some social club or something like that. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like actual, like, trying to fight and challenge power. And I know it takes money to be able to do these things. I totally understand that. But one of the criticisms that I had, and Delilah was on this panel, it was a Green Party panel on the show. I said that you need to advertise more. You need to market more. Like, people shouldn't have to second guess whether or not a third party candidate or Green or whatever is running in their district. Like, they should know. So that's we know mainstream media is going to try to snub you. So that's on the party to find other ways to overcome that. And that's where independent media can come in. But that being said, and Kit, I know you've had this experience too. That being said, when independent media reaches out and you are a candidate and you agree to come on, you actually have to show up. You cannot just not appear.
Oh, I've got a little bit more onto that. I don't mean to cut off the rest of the panel, but look, my criticism towards the libertarians, obviously there's different factions involved in that. I mean, but comparison to the Greens, every time I've interviewed candidates, the Libertarian Party always shows up and is ready to be on the ballot and fight for themselves. Again, in 2022, the Libertarian Party, the Illinois Libertarian Party, was able to secure their candidates for major seats, such as the run for the Illinois governor on down. That is something I've never seen before. All what the Illinois Green Party managed to get on is maybe one local House rep seat, and then 3 seats for water reclamation in Illinois, and that's during the 2022 midterm. Illinois Green Party has to up its game. And also, when in 2020, when I tried to reach out to the Green Party and Libertarian Party for like an independent third-party presidential debate, you want to know what I got from both camps? We're trying to wait to get onto the main stage with Biden and Trump. That's never going to happen. So to all third-party candidates, to the Green Party especially, show up on independent media. Don't waste our time, and don't expect to be at the main stage on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News. You have to show up on independent media. You have to go on different spaces because, again, there's already a few video clips going out there of corporate media saying that third-party candidates are spoiler candidates.
Yep.
They're not. So, again, third parties, don't waste everyone's time. Show up on independent media because that's the only way people are going to hear about you.
Well said. Now I'm going to pivot to you, Delilah. In the end, though, when all is said and done, because I saw this before 2016 with Jill Stein, etc., will people be bold enough to vote third party, or will people basically cower to the fear mongering that you could get Donald Trump, and because of that, they'll vote for Joe Biden again, someone who is barely able to talk at this point in time? What do you think is going to happen, Delilah?
I just want to kind of circle back that I do have the same frustrations with a lot of other people, especially being in leadership positions within the Green Party. Most of our positions are not paid. They're volunteer level positions. And I think a lot of people, especially people who are Dem exiting and they're joining the Green Party, are like, well, when I was in the Democratic Party, it went like this and this and this. And they have this level of like corporate comfortability that we do not have. And so it is really hard to combat that, because I think a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, Green Party doesn't care about working class because you don't pay people enough money for the positions we do pay for. And the thing is, like, most of us candidates, we're reaching into our own pockets and things like that. And I think that that's really something that people should not be ashamed of. So one time when I met Howie Hawkins the first time and I talked to him, it wasn't because of people within the Green Party. It was because of independent media that I was able to make that connection with him. And one of my greatest grievances was that I didn't have the intel, and I didn't have the phone numbers, and I didn't have the voter logs to call people and do all the things that I was supposed to be doing. But specifically because of poor leadership, poor management within our own party. So these are very real concerns. Like, if we mess this up, I don't see us with a future, you know? Like, every year we have to have lawyers that are paid to make sure that we are able to stay on the ballots. I mean, we have ongoing litigation in most states just keeping our candidates on the ballot because of all of the thresholds that we have to meet and the signature requirements and the money involved. So it is a struggle. And I think, again, you know, people will have their grievances, but it's like, Kit shouldn't have to say people should show up to appointments. Like, that should just be known. You know what I'm saying? And I think there's a lot of people who are not invested in seeing this party really grow because they're comfortable where they are and they want us to stay small. And we have to challenge that within our own, you know, with our own systems too. And so it's definitely a struggle. And I'm not one to lie about things. Like, we're not.
Chuck, I'm going to mute you for, I'm sorry, Chuck, I'm going to mute you for just a second because you have an echo. Okay, go ahead, Delilah. Sorry.
No, it's just that we're not, you know, we're not inexperienced. You know what I'm saying? It's just that, like, our obstacles are definitely a lot larger than these two main corporate parties. And so I think just by our principles of being anti-capitalist means that we're vulnerable because we're not going to be pulling in millions of dollars each quarter. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, even with somebody like Cornel West, I still don't know that we'll get that outpouring of donations that some of the other mainstream parties would. And, you know, I think that it's a real concern, but I genuinely hope that people can understand that somebody like Cornel West, who's not out of touch with reality, who's not comfortable in retirement, who's very active and he is dedicated to the causes that he believes in. I would have a lot of questions for people who are trying to speak out against him already. I don't think that they're allied with the working class like the rest of us are.
Do you think that in the end, though, do you think that more people are going to be willing to vote third party, or do you think that they're going to do what happened, you know, before, like when Jill Stein ran against Hillary Clinton, where people are going to just say, well, I'm afraid we'll get Trump again, so I'm going to vote for Joe Biden?
I think that those people who are very dedicated to the corporate parties are going to be quieted by the reality of the situation, that this is about the worst most people have had to experience in their lifetimes. You know what I mean? We didn't get student loan debt forgiveness. Roe v. Wade fell. We didn't get $15 minimum wage. We don't have healthcare in this country. These are the harsh realities. And people who are trying to say, no, we have to vote shame you. It's your fault if you don't get the policies that you want. Do you know how bad it is to live in a red state and feel like it's my fault as a woman that I didn't vote for some, corporate Democrat, that I have to deal with, lack of access to abortion and things like that. That's really, that game, like I said before, is very tired and old. So I don't think people are going to be turned away from Green Party. I think people are going to show up for Green Party, and people are going to show up and vote their conscience, because they've already lived through all the things that they tried to fearmonger us about. At this point, you're being delusional if you don't think, you know what I'm saying, that you can't personally make your situation better, because you can. You don't have to bow down to these entities. And I think that, somebody like Cornel West, who does know how to talk to people, who does understand the reality of the situation, people are houseless, people are suffering, he's not turning a blind eye to that. You know what I'm saying? And that's really important. I think, if anything, to show for our party, we are a working class party. We are a pro-peace party, long term. And, our candidates genuinely, for the most part, from what I've seen, don't bow down in favor to the Democratic or Republican establishments. So we have that.
Awesome. Chuck, what do you think will happen?
Well, first I want to address your earlier question about media and the role, because I think it's really important about us as independent media to help combat those lies, those narratives that we're going to see in corporate media. And I want to commend you, because you've done a phenomenal job in doing that. Not only did you interview him, not only did you ask the right questions, but you re-showed him in clips. I curated your clips and would go on top of it, because I want to hear what he has to say about a free Palestine that I've never heard that before. When there was confusion about a DeSantis article, which is completely mischaracterized, you are the one who asked him about the title, and he said that title was ridiculous. Wall Street Journal came up with that title. He said that it was ridiculous. I think that's an important piece of information to know, as people keep saying he had a revolutionary defense of his education plan. And in his words, he said, I disagree with 98% of everything of DeSantis. He was speaking about one piece called CLT that he's been fighting for years, long before DeSantis. And these are the types of clarifications that are needed, because we know people are going to play political gotcha with Dr. West. We know his Christian faith that makes him say brother this and sister that to literally every person on the planet is going to be used against him, not as someone who approaches someone that way in dialogue. I'm not interested in how he approaches a way in dialogue. I'm interested in whether he stands by his policy. And we have to be clear that Dr. West stands by his policy. And just because he shakes your hand and says, brother, this, that is not a way to say I agree or I approve of you. That's saying, if you get your act right and come with the right policy, I'll give you an invitation back. That's not the same as working with someone. So his interpersonal skills and demeanor, which is driven by his Christian faith, is used against him. And we have to have those conversations with people who don't understand that and make those clarifications.
Well said, Chuck. I think that's important for people to understand. I mean, my mom's like really religious, and like at her church, everybody calls each other that too, like brother and sister and stuff like that. I think that's important for people to understand. Kit, what's your take on all this? Do you think people will have the gutso to do it this time, to actually vote third party and not just vote lesser of two evils? Well, they're both evil at this point, but.
There's two ways of looking at this. My ideal scenario is that we do have a high voter turnout. Let's look at the field right now, and we have to include the Democrats and Republicans. We have Donald Trump, who has successfully rebuilt his image. Not only did he knock the ball out with that CNN town hall, and no, this is not an endorsement of Trump, but he came more prepared than I thought he would be. And again, that's what his supporters want. So already right off the bat, Republican voters are going to turn out to support Donald Trump. Then you have the Democratic primary. RFK Jr., whether you like some of his policies or dislike him, he is at least standing at a strong 20% and growing. Now, depending on how the DNC plays its game, they will, apologies for that, they will go ahead and, weigh in. And of course, we know that Democrats already have who they want as their nominee. This could lead into more fuel and anger and resentment for Democrats for people to look at another venue. Dr. Cornel West's name has, again, a lot of recognition. And unlike Bernie Sanders or anybody else, he has been very clear in calling out the hypocrisy of the Obama administration, of Donald Trump, and yes, of Joe Biden. He doesn't fall for the same traps that you hear a lot of other candidates go through, and that is people vilifying third-party candidates as a spoiler candidate. He has successfully fought back against this narrative, especially this early on in the campaign. So that's something that can inspire a voter to turn out and say, okay, my guy's not going to apologize. My candidate is not going to bow to the media and let them run all over him. Dr. Cornel West, so far, in my perspective, at least as it stands right now, until something else happens, is the candidate that I think a lot of third-party candidates or third-party voters have been asking for. Someone who is consistent and will actually have follow-through. Now, voter turnout. We have to remember people are burnt out by electoral politics. People just might not give a damn. So what Dr. Cornel West and his campaign has to do, and this also, again, is getting the Green Party in order, getting on various media platforms to spread that message. Because already this early on, and this should show you just how much of a threat the media views him, they're saying he's going to spoil the race for Biden. He is a threat to Biden. He's a danger to Biden. He's going to help Trump win. We're already veterans of this. Sabrina, you've seen this firsthand. I have seen this firsthand. Everybody in the viewing audience, all of you have seen this before. This is nothing new. And so this should motivate all of you to be ready with all of your counterpoints and facts to destroy the feelings of these quote-unquote vote blue no matter who sycophants. So voter turnout is key. It's just, again, a matter of message consistency and also for Dr. Cornel West to get on various media platforms to break that narrative and to share the need of why there must be third parties. So again, it really depends on the enthusiasm, the overall field of the both candidates in the Democratic and Republican primary, because again, voters can get upset with both parties and look for another venue. Dr. Cornel West, if his message remains consistent, we could see a massive overflow potentially of support for third parties. But it's all about messaging and getting your image out there on various aspects of social media.
What do you think is going to happen in reference to this? This will be the final question because I know I have a hard stop tonight. But what do you think is going to happen in reference to independent media? Because it was actually independent media that, basically told me about the Bernie Sanders campaigns in a truthful way. I was able to hear more information through Kit at Hardlands Media and through other people, even going all the way back to Majority Report, TYT days. That's where I was able to hear the truth about what Bernie Sanders was trying to do when you compare it to mainstream media. Do you think it was a mistake for some independent outlets to choose to push forward someone like Marianne Williamson to do that Bernie Sanders strategy? Do you think it would have been better just to wait? And I asked that question because now people are definitely, some people were divided before then because some people just didn't want Marianne, but now some people are even more divided because RFK Jr. jumped into the race. And then now Dr. West, who's being brave enough to say, forget the duopoly. This is not going to work. I saw what they did to Bernie. I'm doing this outside the race. Do you think that was a mistake to so quickly just say, okay, this is our person. We're going to go with Marianne, and this is going to be the person that's going to be the progressive candidate? Because the polls, I say this because RFK Jr. came out, announced after Marianne, and he's ahead of her in the polls. And so I'm just curious to hear what you guys think about that. Delilah.
Personally, I don't find Marianne Williamson to be a progressive candidate, especially policy-wise. That's just my opinion. But I think that it's telling. It's telling that comfort within media to humanize the corruption of the, corporate establishment or try to, just get us involved in this game. I think that is very telling that they don't see any point in challenging the establishment. Because even if you're like, oh, well, we're giving, Russell Brand was platforming Marianne Williamson, and he's supposed to be an independent, outlet, right? He went to Florida and one other place when he came to the US, and he's giving Marianne Williamson, and she's having these conversations about democracy. Meanwhile, she's going to do the same thing that everybody else does and back Joe Biden, who has been very directly harmful to a lot of communities. And so I think, I don't know that they should wait. I'd rather see their true colors early on myself personally. But yeah, I think it is very telling that you're comfortable. If you're not allying yourself with the working class, it's telling that you do not you're not in a place where you want to lose a whole lot. That's what it says to me. So,
And Chuck?
I don't like that people came out earlier, starting with Bernie Sanders. What are you doing? Look how early it is. What if somebody did that to you when you were running? Well, that's the thanks that he gives back. I mean, come on. Listen, I start with the policy. I'm a policy guy. Policy is my love language. So let's look at Marianne Williamson. I agree with a lot of her domestic policies, but she's progressive except Palestine. What is that all about? Her war record, we know where she's going to go. She's going to, side with the status quo. So we understand that. We see the differences between Dr. West and her. Forget where they're running. So I have fundamental differences, and that's where Marianne lost me. I do like that she talks about reparations. So will Dr. West. And then you take the other a big outlier, RFK Jr. And I think the most important thing that came out recently, and this is part and parcel probably of running in the Democratic Party, is that he had some sentiments that were somewhat favorable, somewhat empathetic to Palestinians and Roger Waters' point of view. And then 5 minutes later, AIPAC and the Christians United Against Israel got a hold of him, shook him down, maybe beat him up in the back room. And the next day he came out as a raging right-winger against Palestinians. And if you watch his interview with Glenn Greenwald, the lack of humanity that he showed, that he talked about, and the great number of falsehoods that he said were so off-putting, but they did something else. If you could flip in 24 hours on your opinion because AIPAC got a hold of you and other lobbies got a hold of you, then all those things he's saying about the military-industrial complex that I might agree with, what makes you think he's not going to flip on all of that too the second he were to be president? He's going to flip on it. So throw all that other stuff out because we see how he flips. But we don't see Dr. West flipping. We see him holding the line.
Wow, Chuck, you just brought something to my attention. I never thought about that. That's a good point. Pay attention
Think
to what
about
people are doing right now.
Well,
Think
here's
about
the thing. I think, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Okay. Well, to answer your question about independent media, quote unquote, independent media, throwing their weight behind Marianne Williamson and saying that this is our candidate. Yes, God damn it. It was a mistake. It was the dumbest thing ever. But see, I don't want those people to speak for the rest of us. They made their decision. And what they were trying to do, which was pretty downright pathetic, is recreate the good feels of the 2016 and 2020 Bernie Sanders moment. That was lightning in the bottle that Bernie Sanders decided to open up and let loose. It's his own fault that he abandoned his own movement. He allowed the Democratic Party to screw him over. And so now what? We get this manufactured Bernie 2.0 of Marianne Williamson, the Orb Queen, somebody who has had many, many issues in regards to how she treats people, especially who work under her, okay? And she is somebody who is incapable of having a really decent back and forth conversation with voters or commentators. This is somebody who likes to have an area cushioned out for her. And not to mention these same quote unquote media networks that are saying that this is our candidate, this is who she is, this is who we're going to rally around. What do you mean she has all the values you align with? Did you not pay attention to how she feels about, again, funding this ridiculous war in Ukraine that's happening? And again, if she's willing to do that, there's a lot of things that she will also compromise on. And if she's unwilling, and not to mention, wait a minute, how can I even forget this? Crystal Ball interviewed Marianne Williamson at the end of the 2020 election cycle. And again, when confronted about the Democratic Party and the fact that there's a lack of election integrity, Marianne Williamson still said we have to support and help out Joe Biden. So if she was willing to do that then and even acknowledge that there was election fraud taking place, she's going to do the same goddamn thing. So anybody that would have thrown in their money towards that sink boat of that Titanic of a campaign, well, then you already know what the end result is. Marianne Williamson will support Joe Biden, whoever the establishment Democrat will be. And those media networks that were surrounding around her and saying that this is our candidate, she hasn't been really consistent with her points of view and policies. Plus, when also you have said candidate officiate a goddamn wedding, and she's there, and she's good friends with two individuals both, again, Crystal and Kyle, and they're the ones heavily promoting her and saying that she's really big on TikTok. Yeah, everyone can be big on TikTok. Have we not been paying attention what's on TikTok? Not a lot of big brain videos there on TikTok. So, yeah, it was a mistake on their part, and that's the L they have to live with. So it's not the job of independent media to tell people who to vote for. It's our job here at independent media to give commentary and analysis on this sick neoliberal system that we are in and to shine a light on who's running for office. Now, here's what I tell my audience. I'm going to vote independent or third party. The rest of you, you have to come up with your own conclusion because there are a lot of people burnt out by electoral politics. Look at the candidates and vote for the person who's going to, number one, earn your vote. Just because, let's say, RBN or Jimmy Dore or Hardlands Media says this is the person to vote for, no. You make your own choice because it is not the job of our networks to say that this is the person who we should rally around. If that's the case, then this person, whoever they may be they an independent third-party candidate, whoever they may be in this election cycle or those down the road, they have to have the ability to have charisma and, more importantly, be consistent with their points of view. And as said earlier, Dr. Cornel West has been consistent with his policies. But, again, it is up for the viewers and people watching independent media to come to their own conclusion and decide who has earned their individual vote. So to all those who are saying that Marianne Williamson is going to be the candidate, she's went through what? 2 campaign managers, has a history of violence towards her staffers. Yeah, that it's not only has that campaign imploded, it imploded faster than a Titan submarine. Okay, that was too soon. All right, that was too soon.
Damn, kid. Well, thank all of you so much for coming on. Before you go, where can people find you, Delilah?
Oh, yeah, I'm just down here in Texas boiling. So Delilah for Texas on Twitter. If you want to volunteer and help get Cornel West, elected, please join a local chapter and see what you can do because we do need your help. It's not going to be as easy as paying for a few commercials. So yeah, I'd really appreciate if people would, reach out to their local chapters. And if you're having trouble, reach out to me and I'll make some phone calls. Like I'll do whatever I can, because I think it's really important to make sure that people are heard and seen and that the working class is not abandoned the way they've been in the past. So it's really important for all of us to kind of chip in. So yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Awesome. Chuck, where can people find you?
I'm at Chuck Mo D1.
We lost Chuck.
Oh my goodness.
Oh no, Chuck. Chuck, they got Chuck. Kit,
they got him.
Where can people find you, Kit?
Well, okay, until he comes back, start your morning right and righteously angry with Hardlands Media, 9 a.m. Central on YouTube, Rockfin, Rumble, and Odyssey as well. Pour some whiskey in your coffee, grab a mimosa, smoke a bowl, do some shrooms, chew on some cocoa leaves, whatever you need to do to get you through your mornings. Start it off right and righteously angry with Hardlands Media. We have a great time. We have a lot of stories to talk about, especially stuff that's been breaking over the weekend. And you can check out our website too, hardlandsmedia.com. There's a lot of great content there. So please follow us on social media. And we are looking forward to hanging out with all of you lovely people in the morning.
Awesome. Chuck, where can people find you?
I'm at Chuck Mo D1 on Twitter. And in particularly the next few days, I will be posting a lot. I'm down in Atlanta posting about this incredible Stop Cop City movement. In my opinion, it is one of the greatest domestic issues going on right now, because if we don't stop Cop City here, there will be cop cities in every single state in America to a dystopian police force that will be irreversible. And so they are on the front lines here, have been fighting this good fight. And I'd like to extend an invitation to Dr. Cornel West, who I saw in Standing Rock, and I saw in Ferguson and Baltimore, to come down to Atlanta. And I know he will. That's how confident. And stand with the protesters here to help stop this cop city from being built.
There you go. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sabs. Appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, guys, we do have 3 stories I want to cover. I do have a hard stop at 7 o'clock. So let's go ahead and dive pretty quickly. I'm gonna go to the super chats first. Thank you so much for the super chat, Dr. Nick, as you should. Thank you, Wicked Designs. This edifice is a farce and needs to be toppled, or we're all doomed. Thank you, Philosophical. Marianne has big elementary school teacher who thinks she's too smart for the job energy. That's that's interesting. That's a good one. And thank you for this as well. Cornel needs to talk nuclear power. The Green Party is full of anti-nuclear maniacs. You can't pretend to be serious about climate and be anti-nuclear. I think we were going to have I was going to try to do a debate about that on this channel at some point. And I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Listen, these fear-mongering Democrats that tell you third party will get you the Republican, first put on your best crazy eyes, then tell them, yeah, I'm good with that. I'm willing to just let the entire system burn down. Now, if you got an issue with that, then you better go tell the Democrats to deliver. And I don't mean throw us a bone. You don't have to be the Joker to get them to bend. Just convince them you are. Scare the living crap out of them. And thank you for this tip as well. Something I learned from libertarians and conservatives, while the left focuses on demanding presidential candidates for new laws we'd like to see, Medicare for all, tax the rich, to name a few, libertarians and conservatives say there are laws already on the books we can enforce to help us. When interviewing Wes and others, we shouldn't just ask what we want, but what laws that are already on the books that you'd enforce. That's a really good point, Roger. Didn't think about that. And thank you for this one as well. DM'd you and Kit a few laws they can enforce. Now, should they win, that you can pose as questions. Let's build this list of laws already on the books as questions. Regarding laws we'd like to see pass, let's include giving us DOJ to revoke corporate charters like state AGs can, but go further to allow DOJ to issue out cooperative charters. Thank you so much for that. Okay, want to shout out patrons really quickly. This is going to be a test to see if I can do 3 stories in 1 hour. I think I can. I think I can get there. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. Don't forget about those Sabbies. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Let's give it up for James Johnson in the house. Over here, we call them newbies. Thank you guys so much for that. Okay, what else are we going to discuss? Because we do have some more stories to touch on. So let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail for you guys. Okay, tonight we are also discussing Chris Hedges and Matt Taibbi target. Interesting discussion there. Yes, people are still coming after Matt Taibbi, so we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss the Russia almost coup. We're going to get into that story. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. We just covered third party or bus about Dr. West, and you'll see there's Jill Stein there, who's going to be his campaign manager with the panel. And last but not least, the Supreme Court Navajo water crisis. We're going to talk about that ruling that came from the Supreme Court. That should actually be a pretty quick story, but I think a lot of people may not know about that. I don't feel like it's been mainstream news, so we need to talk about that. But let's get into what happened yesterday. So yesterday, I was at the gym, just doing my little thing on the treadmill. I watch CNN when I work out. I have it on mute, but I have the captions on and I listen to music. So I listen to music and watch the news at the same time. All of a sudden, I'm like, what is going on in Russia? I'm seeing all these captions that say they're attempting to take down Putin. They've invaded. They're on their way to invade Moscow. They're going to take them down. And I'm seeing like liberal media just basically become excited about something that they didn't have all the answers to yet. This is another reason why I choose not to jump on camera as soon as a story breaks, even if I'm at home and I have the time to do so, because things can change in a 24-hour news cycle. So I decided to wait until more information was released, and I think that was a good idea. Now, it all started with this gentleman named Prigogine. And we're going to get started with that first. What just happened in Russia? The Wagner crisis explained. Let's go on here. First things first, we're going to start with Prigozhin. Who is Prigozhin and why is he so important? 62-year-old Prigozhin had been a fervent supporter of Russia's war in Ukraine and is in charge of the Russian private military contractor known as the Wagner Group. Prigozhin had played a central role in the war, first by deploying his mercenaries on the front lines and later by recruiting heavily from prisons to bolster Moscow's depleted forces. Wagner led the onslaught in Bakhmut, which culminated in Putin declaring the city under Russian control, his first significant territorial gain since last summer. Americans may remember Prigozhin as the financier of the internet research agency, the Russian troll farm, that the Justice Department named in 2018 indictment over the interference of, I'm just going to leave that there, and weaponizing social media. So let's start with that. So you know who he is now. He was I guess we'll call him a former ally of Putin now. Let's go on to how this all started. Internal tensions between Prigozhin and Russian military leaders have been simmering for months over what Prigozhin believed were leadership failures within the military. Prigozhin accused Russian generals of stonewalling his ammunition requests and as a result blamed them for his fighters dying in heaps in Ukraine. The dispute reached a boiling point Friday when Prigozhin accused Russian forces of conducting a strike on his fighters at an encampment in Ukraine. So let's go on. We're going to jump ahead here. What exactly did he do? Prigozhin said that he had taken control of the main Russian military command base in the southern region of Rostov and told 2 Russian military commanders that he would blockade Rostov and send his forces to Moscow unless he could confront his enemies. So keep that in mind. And that's Shoigu and Gerasimov. Prigozhin called for Russians to join Wagner against Shoigu and Gerasimov. He also accused the pair of lying about the war in Ukraine and undercounting casualties. This is not a military coup, but a march of justice. That's what Prigozhin declared. By Saturday, Prigozhin had agreed to turn his forces around and not to march to Moscow. But that was not the way it was explained yesterday. And this is part of the problem. So I want to show you the first one that I saw, and this was from Fox. Listen to how they explained what was going on yesterday, because media, they had to come back and they had to retract statements because they didn't have the correct information. Listen to this.
So first off, can you help kind of break down exactly what is going on here? Because there's a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty.
Sure. So Prigozhin is the head of a private military corporation that was set up by Putin to do nasty things in various parts of the world that Putin didn't want to do officially. That's number one. Number two is that Prigozhin has been for months accusing the Russian Ministry of Defense of not supplying his troops with enough ammunition or support and getting them killed in the process. Number three is that he recently let out a video and has accused the Ministry of Defense of directly attacking his men and killing scores of them. After that, he declared that he would engage in what he called this march of justice. And number four, where he's at now, is in the city of Rostov, which is in the south. It's about 300 miles south of Moscow. But critically, it is the headquarters of the military district that's controlling the war in Ukraine. And the interesting thing there is he took the city essentially without resistance. So that's where we stand right now on the ground.
Let's just pause there. So that piece right there where he said he took the city. Okay. Hold on to that. Hold on to that piece and we'll come back. because that was the same message that came from a lot of media outlets yesterday. Oh God, Prigozhin has come in and he has seized Moscow. Prigozhin has come in and Russia has a civil war. It's internal conflict. They're fighting each other. He's coming in. He's taking Putin down. This is it. We win. I saw it all over social media yesterday. All over social media. They had to come back and give you an update because that wasn't really the case. So let's go on a little bit more, and I'm going to show you when they have to come back and retract their statement.
So I guess, is this really a huge threat to Putin's power? Because that's what it sounds like he has even indicated at this point. Obviously, we know in situations like this, Putin kind of tries to downplay what's going on. But is it really a threat to his leadership?
It is a threat. It's a threat to his legitimacy, to his claim to be able to control what's going on in his country. It's important, though, for viewers to understand that a coup d'etat can't happen with force alone. Prigozhin needs political allies in the elite to support this move, and we simply don't know if he has them. He's seen as essentially as crazy and brutal, and he has never been understood to have had strong support in the elite. So that's a big question, as we go forward. Secondly, he's got a lot of men behind him, of course, and it's important to understand that most of these guys are convicts. And he follows sort of this code of the prison, this for absolute loyalty to him. And these convicts have no love lost for Putin because guess who put them in prison in the first place? So this is really a sticky situation for the Kremlin.
Okay. Now, they were not alone. Like I said, other media outlets came forward about this as well. Let's hear what Vladimir Putin actually had to say. Now, Fiorella, as you know, she is there actually on the ground in Russia. She posted this and she said, here is his full speech on the events that have unfolded with Prigozhin. We're going to have to read through the subtitles or the captions here, guys, okay? But listen to this.
Обращаюсь к гражданам России, к личному составу вооруженных сил, правоохранительных органов и специальных служб, к бойцам и командирам, которые сейчас сражаются на своих боевых позициях, отбивают атаки противника. Делают это героически, зная, сегодня еще раз ночью говорил с командующими всех направлений. Обращаюсь и к тем, кого обманом или угрозами втянули в преступную авантюру, толкнули на путь тяжкого преступления, вооруженного мятежа.
He referred to it as armed. You see this? I'm also addressing those who have been lured into this criminal enterprise and pushed onto the path of the gravest crime, armed mutiny. He referred to it as mutiny, what they were attempting to do here.
На путь тяжкого преступления, вооруженного мятежа. Россия сегодня ведет тяжелейшую борьбу за свое будущее, отражает агрессию неонацистов и их хозяев. Против нас направлена фактически вся военная, экономическая, информационная.
This piece is important. Virtually the entire military, economic, and information machine of the West is directed against us. Now, another thing that some people did say yesterday, I don't have evidence of this, so I'm just going to be honest. Some things that people were saying yesterday is that they felt like this was completely initiated by the West, by the U.S. government. I don't know. Hopefully more information will come out about this later on, but right now I don't have any proof to back that up.
Машина Запада. Мы боремся за жизнь и безопасность наших людей, за наш суверенитет и независимость, за право быть и оставаться Россией, государством с тысячелетней историей. Эта битва, когда решается судьба нашего народа, требует единения всех сил, единства, консолидации и ответственности, когда в сторону должно быть отброшено все, что ослабляет нас. Любые распри, которыми могут воспользоваться и пользуются наши внешние враги, чтобы подорвать нас изнутри.
See, even though it was an internal conflict, he is saying that, well, basically what he believes is that this was initiated externally.
И потому действия, которые раскалывают наше единство, это, по сути, отступничество от своего народа, от боевых товарищей, которые сражаются сейчас на фронте. Это удар в спину нашей стране и нашему народу. И именно такой удар был нанесен по России в 1917 году, когда страна вела Первую мировую войну. Но победу у нее украли. Интриги, склоки, политиканство за спиной армии и народа обернулись величайшим потрясением.
I'm going to mute this and it'll be easier for me to just read along. Intrigue, squabbles, politicking behind the back of the army and the people turned into the greatest shock. The destruction of the army and the collapse of the state and the loss of vast territories is what he's saying there. As a result of the tragedy, he talks about the Civil War, the Russians killed the Russian brothers and sisters, and various political adventurers and foreign forces that divided the country tore it apart and took advantage of it. So he's talking about what happened before in the past. We will not let this happen again, he says. We will protect our people and our state from any threats, including from internal treason, he referred to this as. And what we have come across is precisely treason. So that's the piece I really wanted you to see. Excessive ambitions and personal interests have led people to treason in our country and in our people, and to the cause for which soldiers and commanders of the Wagner group, heroes who liberated Soledar and Artemiswas, the cities and the villages of Donbass, fought and gave their lives for, and for the unity of the Russian world. And then it goes on to say here, their name and glory will also be betrayed by those who are trying to organize a revolt, pushing the country to anarchy and fratricide, to defeat and eventually to surrender. Now, I want to pause here for a second. Why would someone do that? Why would someone go against their own, right? There could be money involved. That's usually what it comes back to. There could be money involved. And I think that's where we're going to talk about that in a second as well. I repeat, any internal turmoil is a deadly threat to our statehood, to us as a nation. He said, this is a blow to Russia, to our people, and our actions to protect the fatherland from such a great threat will be tough. Now, I want to come out here because that was his speech. Now, this is when corporate media had to come back in and they had to retract what they said before. And that's why I told people how they jumped on this. It says Wagner chief claiming to turn forces around. Now, keep in mind, before this, they had already said that the city, Moscow, had been taken over. This is what they told people yesterday. It was taken over. Oh my God, they're about to take them down. Woohoo, we won. And then they had to come back and say this. How embarrassing.
Let's begin with this breaking news. The head of the mercenary Wagner group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, says he is calling off his troops from their march on Moscow, potentially ending what appeared to be a possible coup attempt. Officials in Belarus claim their president, Alexander Lukashenko, had reached a deal with the Wagner boss to halt his troops. Prigozhin says his private army had seized control of Russian military facilities in two critical cities, Rostov-on-Don, that's about 700 miles south of Moscow, and the city of Voronezh, about the halfway point on the road to Moscow. President Putin called the actions by Prigozhin a betrayal and a stab in the back to the Russian people, and warned those who follow Prigozhin will pay a price. Christian, both confusing, complex, all of
it wouldn't have been confusing if you guys would have just waited to report the story the correct way. That's why there was confusion, because you guys had already told people that they took over the city and there was this coup and you didn't wait. So I'll let her go on a little bit more here, and then I'm going to show you what Max Blumenthal said about this. This is really funny.
This is just a toss up in the air.
Yeah,
amazing.
And actually, General Spider Marks reminded me of Churchill's, long time ago description of Russia as a riddle wrapped up in in an enigma and all the rest of it. In other words, you just don't know until you know. So it looks like Prigozhin was trying to send a message to the Ministry of Defense and to the head of the Russian armed forces. Those people have been his target since the beginning of this war, and he has complained bitterly that they have completely messed up and literally botched the invasion and the war in Ukraine, and that he has presented himself and his independent paramilitary force as the Russian saviors, if you like. And pretty much they are the only ones who have scored any, even though they might be minute, actual battlefield victories. And so it appears that he has now been pressured by Putin, who got Alexander Lukashenko, his big ally in Belarus, to engineer some kind of about-face. And according to Prigozhin, that is what has happened. We're waiting to be able to broadcast his latest audio to explain to everybody exactly what he thinks he's doing next. And we've got full coverage on this breaking story. We have CNN Chief International Security Correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh, National Security Reporter Natasha Bertrand, and the former CIA Chief of Russia Operations and CNN National Security Analyst Steve Hall.
They had to come in and really do damage control here because of the information that was previously put out. Ecuadorian Taco says it would appear with an accent, we lied to you peasants. Basically. I love that Ecuadorian Taco.
So Nick, we were on together as this breaking news came of this latest intervention by Prigozhin and his latest Telegram audio message. He having taken a very significant military headquarters in the last 24 hours.
Notice how the vocabulary has changed now. It's no longer coup, it's intervention.
Do we think now the Prigozhin threat is over?
No, I think it would be premature to suggest that. And indeed, he says the only reason he's turning around his columns on the way to Moscow, having, he says, got 200 kilometers within the city outskirts, is to stop bloodshed. He doesn't make a reference to a negotiation with the president of Belarus. That's done by the Belarusian president's own staff, suggesting that, in fact, Lukashenko intervened after speaking to Putin, and some sort of deal appears to have been hatched. But I don't think we know the entirety of it. It may be that there are going to be significant changes at the head of Russia's Ministry of Defense, but even if the ultimate targets of Prigozhin's march on Moscow end up being removed from their jobs, and that's the Defense Minister Shoigu, the head of the Ukrainian campaign, Gerasimov, and Chief of Staff, still, he's really crossed the Rubicon here, frankly, taking control of Rostov, moving through Voronezh, blockades put into Lipetsk, and putting that kind of military pressure on Putin, causing Putin to make that very stern speech today. It's quite clear that, to me, it will be hard to suddenly put the clock back and have Prigozhin a valued member of the Russian military establishment. So I think...
Look, I want to show you guys something really quick. So this is Prigozhin here, right? He kind of reminds me of he kind of looks like Mike from Breaking Bad. I am not kidding. That's who he kind of reminded me of, Mike from Breaking Bad. Now, Mike could do some pretty cool things on Breaking Bad. I don't think Mike would resort to this level, okay? I don't think Mike would go that far. Now, because so many people rushed to put that information out and it wasn't correct, Max Blumenthal tweeted, why couldn't you and so many other neocon half-wits just shut the fuck up and avoid humiliating yourselves by premature ejaculating over Russia's civil war? So he's referring to, I'll show you this right here. Andrew Kimmel said, why the silence tonight, Max Blumenthal? All right. So these were, some of the people who were ready to come out and make claims. The odds of you not being a clown are slim to none. And he has a screenshot here. The odds of this being true are slim to none. And that's where it said Belarusian president held talks with Prigozhin today. Lukashenko says that Prigozhin has agreed to stop the movement of armed persons on the territory of Russia and to take further steps to de-escalate. And he also has a screenshot here. Wagner head says group standing down after claims of deal. So this was the part where a lot of people, especially mainstream media, but people just lost it like yesterday, just immediately knew like, oh, it's over. It's over. This is it. We win. Didn't wait for more information or anything like that. And Max obviously patiently waited. Kim Iverson chimed in and said Russia was in the process of absorbing Wagner Group into the regular armed forces, effectively stripping Prigozhin of the power he's accustomed to. Prigozhin likely demanded a lot of money, was denied it, decided to extort money from the West, and then use that leverage against Putin for an even larger payout. Now Prigozhin is likely a billionaire, and Wagner is absorbed into the military. Everyone wins. Even the West wins with the narrative that Russia is weaker. Literally everyone got what they wanted. I think Kim is right. I think she hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, no one really lost. Just something to think about, because mainstream media is not going to tell you that. They are not framing it that way at all. It was interesting how quickly people had to come back and say, we are live again, breaking news. I just want to change my statement. It appears there's no coup after all. That's why I don't jump onto camera the moment a story breaks, because things do change over time. Yeah. So that was yesterday. We'll continue following this story to see if more changes do develop. But the lesson to be learned here, guys, is sometimes it's good to just wait a bit. Sometimes it's good to just wait a bit. Okay, we are moving on to our next story. Go ahead and if you have not had a chance to do so, smash that like button for me, guys. That helps me with the algorithm. Thank you. We're going to our next story here, and this is about Matt Taibbi. Again, apparently still heavily targeted by not just the IRS, but also the FBI. So this is important for people to hear. It seems like the Twitter files was, just yesterday. It's actually been a while since the very first one was reported by Matt Taibbi, but he is still obviously experiencing the effects of this. Recently, Chris Hedges interviewed him about the targeting that's come in reference to him. And something that I want you to think about, why is it that he seems to be the target and he's not the only journalist that worked on the Twitter Files project, whereas the others don't seem to have this sort of attack, right? Hold on to that question, because we're going to get to what I think may be the answer. Listen to this.
It was a Saturday. It was Christmas Eve. Taibbi did not owe taxes. The case was 4 years old. All this suggests that the IRS case was politically motivated and the FBI was monitoring Taibbi. Taibbi ran into the buzzsaw of orchestrated character assassination when he testified. The Democratic members of the committee rarely let Taibbi speak. They delivered vicious and insulting diatribes, which were then broadcast on outlets such as MSNBC and CNN, part of the effort to further discredit him. The ranking committee member, Stacey Plaskett, sent Taibbi a letter accusing him of lying to Congress and threatened Taibbi with a 5-year prison sentence. Joining me to discuss this wholesale censorship and the efforts by the ruling establishment, especially the Democratic Party, to discredit him and his work is Matt Taibbi. Matt, let's go back to December 24th, 2022. You're in the Park 55 Hotel in San Francisco, and explain what you're doing.
Well, I was putting together the final touches on a story about it was going to be called Twitter and Other Government Agencies. About a week and a half into the Twitter Files project, we found a series of documents that had come to Twitter through the Foreign Influence Task Force. And it was basically just a pile of reports that came from various government agencies. Sometimes we could tell which ones they were, sometimes not. But in essence, most of them were simply, a few paragraphs of text along with a gigantic Excel spreadsheet of account names. And they would say things like, we assess that the following are related to Russia's Internet Research Agency, or are working to further anti-Ukraine objectives, or whatever. And, we would check and see that, sometimes all of the accounts were gone. Sometimes it was a percentage of them. But in most cases, there was some kind of action. And, this was an important story that we put out. I was very nervous about it. It included information about the CIA, the DNI, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI. And that's what I was preparing to do on Christmas Eve.
And we should be clear that before you made this release on December 24th, the FBI had already denounced your work on the Twitter files, saying it was the product of conspiracy theorists. This is their quoting them, who fed the public, quote, misinformation, whose sole purpose was discrediting the agency.
So just a reminder, the first Twitter file dropped in December, and sometimes I feel like it feels like it was just yesterday that this happened, but this is how long, this has been going on. Just a reminder, guys, it's been almost 6 months since the very first one. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I even referenced the FBI's quote in the beginning of the thread. Sort of sarcastically, I said, of course, my sole purpose isn't discrediting the FBI. There are other agencies I want to discredit as well. And the idea of that was to, among other things, make the public aware that the FBI had commented on the story, in a way that I think was intended to intimidate a little bit, in addition to not answering, the questions that we sent. But yes, they had already made it known that they were paying attention to the story, and that was unnerving certainly on one level.
So that's your answer right there to part of that question. The reason why they seem to come after Matt is because he was the one that dropped that very first Twitter file, which was revealing about the FBI. They were already watching him then. So some people thought that this happened after he testified in front of Congress, but you can see they were already watching him the moment he was going to drop that story. So that's important for people to see.
Let's talk about the Foreign Influence Task Force. You said you estimate that it has a staff of about 80. What is it? Who's on it? To the extent that when was it set up, and how does it work?
I don't know a whole lot about when it was set up. Other reporters have done some work on that. Li Fang, who is one of the Twitter Files reporters, had done some work on it. There was he was where we got the number 80 for staff for the FITF. As far as we could determine, it was mostly comprised of FBI, Homeland Security, and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The FITF essentially became like the throughway junction for government requests for content moderation. And the system they worked out was basically requests that came from the federal government would come through the FBI, and anything that came up through the states would come through DHS. And they had a very specific means of doing that. They had basically a communications platform they called Teleporter. It was like a one-way door. It was a little bit like Mission Impossible. Like there was a way to rig it so that once content went through there, it wouldn't last very long. It would delete after a period of time. But we recovered some of the stuff that was in there. But that's what the FITF does. And what's interesting about it, there are two things that are interesting. One, it claims that it's only monitoring foreign material, but we found ample evidence of them looking even at the accounts of very small, following American domestic account holders. Yeah. And the other thing is, these are not personnel that are trying to make cases. They're just monitoring social media. It's FBI agents who, they're not trying to put together something for trial. They're just watching.
Well, not.
So that piece is really important. And I saw someone mention the Edward Snowden comment. Yeah, he was right. Like, they've been watching all along. But this isn't really important because that was something I did not understand from the Twitter files. The fact that the FBI, they were actually flagging some of these accounts were actually small accounts. And to me, that didn't make any sense. Like, why are you watching people who have like maybe just 200 followers? Like, why are you even paying attention to that account, right? But it just goes to show you that they're everywhere. They're even probably right here, you know? So the thing is that how long have they been watching? How long have they been doing this? You know, because Matt said, I think the files went all the way back to, I think it went a little bit back to, I think 2016, I think is how far he said they went back. I forget. I have to go back and look at the interview. But all I'm saying is there's no telling how long this has been going on. No telling. Now, there's more that I want to get to in reference to this interview, because there's another section here where Chris Hedges brings up what happened with the interview between Matt Taibbi and Mehdi Hasan. And I want you to hear something that Chris Hedges says here, that this was basically, you know, an attack by Mehdi Hasan, which I told you guys that as well. I felt like, oh, yeah, this was just a setup. But there's more to that story. It was a setup. It was a trap, I believe. But is it possible that that interview by Mehdi Hasan, is it possible that the entire goal of that interview was to make it so that Congress would flag Matt Taibbi and would threaten him with jail time? Let's get into it.
Zero respect for.
He's a good interviewer, though.
No, he's a bully. I mean, you know, it's the classic technique. He seized on these incredibly minor errors. We've all made them. We used to run error boxes in the New York Times. No, you've made them. I've made them. We all make them. But they were really almost irrelevant. I mean, you confused a timeline. You had a misplaced acronym. But then he blows this up into evidence that you've lied to Congress. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seconds this accusation, and that's when the Plaskett sends this letter.
Look at the timeline. Look at the events, guys. Hold on. Can I get it back to the captions? Okay, let's listen to watch this.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seconds this.
Okay, this is a very important. AOC seconds the accusation after Mehdi Hasan accused Matt Taibbi of lying. And he goes on to say, and that's when Plaskett sends the letter. So let's just go through the timeline. Let's just go through the steps, guys. He has the interview with Mehdi Hasan. Of course, Mehdi Hasan tweets out clips from the interview onto Twitter. Obviously, Mehdi has a large account. AOC being one of the people who responds to one of those clips, right? And then basically saying, oh, yes, he's not being truthful here. Now, why was it AOC's role to jump into that conversation? Now, anyone could have chimed in, but it was really interesting to me that it was her. You know, not Jamal Bowman, not Cori Bush, not any of them. It was her. She chimed in. And then after she chimed in, then the letter comes from Delegate Plaskett, which basically threatens prison time, 5 years prison time, because Plaskett basically was trying to say she was able to point to that interview with Mehdi Hasan and to his testimony in front of Congress. And she was able to say, you know, perjury is a crime. She was trying to scare him and threaten him in a sense and tell him that you could get 5 years for this. So do you guys see the connection between mainstream media and our government and the justice system? All this is connected. The interviews on mainstream media, AOC, who's a congresswoman, chimes in on Twitter, and she has, millions of followers. And then boom, just like that, Plaskett sends that letter. This is dangerous. That's dangerous, you know? Let's go on.
Accusation, and that's when the Plaskett sends this letter. and that's the first step into trying to destroy. If you look at the pattern and the attacks on Julian Assange, it's the same. You essentially discredit their reporting, then you begin a sustained campaign of character assassination, and once they're isolated, the way Julian was, you can pretty much do whatever you want to them. And I certainly see that. It hasn't gone as far, obviously, as it has with Julian, but I certainly see that pattern being played out against you.
Yeah, so I made a big mistake with Mehdi. I mean, I had a beef with MSNBC for years because I used to be a regular guest on the channel. I was the last person, I think, on MSNBC who was invited on who expressed any kind of skepticism at all about the Russia case. And then even then it was quite mild. But after that, I wasn't invited back on. And I always thought that, you know, MSNBC owed it to its audience to at least answer critics about its wrong reporting on the Russia story. So I thought it would have been hypocritical to refuse an invitation to come on Mehdi's show. I did come on and I wasn't prepared. I was overconfident. I thought I had everything locked up. I thought the worst thing that could happen to me is that I'd, sounds a little bit stupid on air, but he found some errors and that rattled me on air. But the problem was he misunderstood what those errors meant. He thought they were far more significant than they were. In fact, I basically confused the Center for American Security and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the latter being a part of the Homeland Security Agency. And he thought that I was basically saying an intelligence agency was involved with content moderation when it wasn't. In fact, both CIS and CISA were involved in this one program, and he didn't understand that. So he thought it was a really huge, significant, intentional error. It was actually a picayune, meaningless error. But then he took the additional step of trying to get members of Congress interested in prosecuting me for lying to Congress. And it was at this point that,
You see that? He took the additional step. Look at this.
Were involved in this one program, and he didn't understand that. So he thought it was a really huge, significant, intentional error. It was actually a picayune, meaningless error. But then he took the additional step of trying to get members of Congress interested in prosecuting me for lying.
For lying to Congress. You see that? Mehdi Hasan took the additional step. And what does that tell you? That tells you that these politicians, particularly obviously the Democratic Party, they have commentators on MSNBC in their back pocket. That's what I gathered from that. Pay close attention, you guys. This is how these things work. This should alarm anyone that there are these politicians have commentators from mainstream media in their back pocket. See how easy that worked? That's why you have to dismantle. The whole system has to be dismantled. That's why you can't reform it.
To Congress. And it was at this point that, I tweeted at him and I said, Mehdi, come on, all jokes aside now, like it's time to get serious. You're trying to put me in jail for this stuff and you're wrong. And, nothing. And that was a real eye opener for me. I mean, I get all's fair in love and war, even on Twitter, everything's in bounds, but this is no joke, and they really mean it. I think that, I think they really want to press this stuff as far as they can.
I think Matt is a little too trusting of Mehdi Hasan's intentions. I don't think Mehdi Hasan even cared if the error that he found was huge or not. I think he was just looking for something to try to nail him on, whether it was big or not big. I do question Mehdi Hassan's motives. I do question his intentions. I don't trust him. I don't think anybody you should trust, like these commentators on mainstream media. There's a reason why they're there. There's a reason why Mehdi Hassan is on MSNBC and someone like you is not on MSNBC, or maybe someone like there's a reason why Mehdi Hassan is there and Kim Iverson is not. Think about that. Think about that, guys. So for me, I honestly think Mehdi's intentions from day one was just pure evil. That's just me. But I think Matt was being a little bit too nice there.
Oh, you've raised this, but it's important about the National Guard technology support staffer who posted documents online, and then the response of the media, which are like you, I found just terrifying.
So this is the so-called Pentagon leaker story,
right?
Where you have a 21-year-old Air National Guardsman from Massachusetts, and God knows how he gets access to this kind of intelligence, but he does. He's in a Discord room where he's playing Minecraft, which is a game I play with my kids. And they're passing around some intelligence. And what's incredible about this is that the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Bellingcat track down this person and essentially deliver him up to the authorities. And now they're doing stories based on the stuff that he was leaking. Now, can you ever remember, Chris, journalists working to turn in essentially sources? It's a total violation of what journalism is. We're not on the side. We're not part of the government's investigatory apparatus, but they see themselves that way. And when they pair up with these organizations like Bellingcat, which are sort of government funded, what they call open source intelligence agencies, it's a totally new role for the media. And, they see themselves as doing the right thing by putting the right people in the crosshairs of government.
Is this
What I want you to think about is the fact that we talked about Jack Teixeira, the 21-year-old that leaked those documents from the Pentagon. It is very interesting that after he leaked that information, now mainstream media is doing stories on that. They're covering it because it got out there, right? Like there's no telling how many people may have seen this like on Discord or Twitter or whatever other platform that he used. So it's like now they had to cover it. They had that permission to cover it because of that. But if it had not been for that leak, we probably would have never known about that information. They don't like when that happens.
Driven by fear of Trump? Would you say that's the engine?
I would hope so, right? Because that's at least a reason. But I worry sometimes that it's an even baser phenomenon than that. That it's groupthink, it's careerism. And it's a new kind of political movement that I think is developing, where there's a new sensation, I think, within the media business for sure, that I had not clued into for a long time. But it's this belief that whatever we were doing before, when the type of approach that we were taking to reporting no longer works. We can't just put stuff out there and hope that the public makes the right decisions. We have to act and make sure that they do the right thing with the information, which means that we have to have lockstep discipline about what we say. We have to filter out things that we think the public can't handle, and we have to exaggerate things that we think they need to know. And this is a new vision for how information is disseminated. That again, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. But to me, it reminds me of something that you would have seen in the Soviet Union in the the late 20s or early 30s, or or in other countries that have authoritarian traditions.
Well,
something that you really need to pay attention to. It's 2023. This is why I say I feel like this country is always moving. I feel like we're moving backwards, not forwards, because of that. What he mentioned about the totalitarianism from the Soviet regime, and here we are now. And it's very, very scary. Again, first file dropped in December of 2022. Here we are. It is already, it's almost July, June 25th, and they're still targeting Matt Taibbi. And this is what I said, like, even when Jimmy was on here, this is what I said. They'll turn on you in a minute. They'll turn on you just like that. Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. He got 600 million Washington Post / CIA deal when Bezos bought the Washington Post. Oh, he forgot. Sorry. He forgot 600 million Washington Post / CIA deal when Bezos bought the Washington Post. That's a good point. Very good point. But yeah, like this idea that it's okay for people to reveal their sources now, this idea that like you have to be careful about the information that you reveal, whether or not it'll be taken seriously, or even if it is taken seriously, are they going to come after you next? I mean, imagine if, so Daniel Ellsberg passed away recently, right? Daniel Ellsberg, he revealed the Pentagon Papers. Imagine if that happened today. Imagine if the Pentagon Papers were revealed today. What you see happening with people like Matt Taibbi, what you saw with happening with Edward Snowden, with Julian Assange, they would have came after Daniel Ellsberg like that. That's why I said we're moving backwards, not forward. Okay, let's get to these comments, and I got one more story for you. Bill says Taibbi took a real beating over the Twitter files. They don't like real journalists in the U.S. Toady, this Big Brother enterprise is off the chain. Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like we're living like in Big Brother. Okay, a final story today. I'm not sure a lot of people have heard about this, but the Supreme Court has been making a couple of rulings over the past 2 weeks, and this one is actually very important, especially for those who are indigenous, because the Supreme Court has ruled against the Navajo Nation water rights case. Now, we're talking about the indigenous people, the people who were here on the land first. And Supreme Court ruled against it. Now, a lot of people are talking about this. Listen to this story.
We're back now with breaking news out of the Supreme Court, new rulings, including one against the Navajo Nation on their effort to get the federal government to address the tribe's desperate need for access to clean water. NBC's Julia Ainsley is joining us now with more on this. So we have, Julia, been watching, waiting, thinking it was going to happen any moment now. Some decisions, major decisions, I should say, involving affirmative action, student loans, voting rights, gay rights as well, and much, much more. This is not that. However, this is a pretty important decision as well. Walk folks through what we know.
Yeah, that's right, Anna. It's the end of the term here at the Supreme Court. We expect more decisions tomorrow and into next week, but we're thinking that with that little time left, some of those bigger decisions would be coming. But today we got 4 smaller decisions, but most important among those, and it's not a small decision for the Navajo Nation, is a decision, a 5-4 decision in which Justice Kavanaugh wrote for the majority, saying that a 155-year-old law regarding water access for the Navajo Nation means that the federal government does not have to ensure water access for the Navajo Nation. That's a
Let's just pause there for a second. Are any of the people on the Supreme Court, are any of these justices indigenous? No, right? Okay. But they're making decisions for what happens to the indigenous people. Anybody see a problem with that? The Supreme Court has ruled that the federal government does not have to guarantee access to clean water to the Navajo Nation. It wasn't just Flint, guys. It's not just Jackson, Mississippi. Think about that. This is disgusting.
blow for the Navajo Nation. It's one of their most important issues. They've been fighting for water access. They say that the United States needs to do more to make sure that their large swath of land, bigger than the state of West Virginia, is able to get water access. And today, Justice Kavanaugh saying the law didn't provide for that, and it's not up to us to rewrite a 155-year law.
In other words, screw you. Figure it out on your own. Listen to this. The Supreme Court rules against the Navajo Nation in water rights case. The vote was 5-4. With the majority finding that an 1868 treaty did not require the federal government to ensure the tribe had access to water. Isn't this crazy? You can't survive without water. It goes on to say the Supreme Court ruled against the Navajo Nation on Thursday in a water rights case, rejecting the tribe's suit against the federal government in a dispute over access to the drought-depleted Colorado River system. The vote was 5-4, Kavanaugh writing for the majority. He said an 1868 peace treaty at the heart of the case did not require the federal government to take affirmative steps to secure water for the Navajo. And to that, I say, so what? You could do it anyway. Let me go on here. To date, their efforts to find out what water rights the United States holds for them have produced an experience familiar to any American who has spent time in the Department of Motor Vehicles. Now, this is coming from Justice Neal. The Navajo have waited patiently for anyone, to help them, only to be told repeatedly that they have been standing in the wrong line and must try another. He added that the runaround had persisted for decades. When this routine first began in the earnest, Elvis was still making his rounds on the Ed Sullivan Show. They've been fighting for access to water for decades. Now, they don't want to make a decision. The federal government doesn't want to give indigenous people access to water, but they can give billions of dollars to people in Ukraine. Pay attention, folks. More U.S. Supreme Court decisions and developments. So that's the water rights case. There's other ones coming up as well. The Navajo tribe is one of the largest in the United States with more than 300,000 enrolled members, Justice Kavanaugh wrote. And its reservation, a product of the treaty, is the biggest in the nation, spanning more than 17 million acres in parts of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. It's about the size of West Virginia. The tribe sued the federal government in 2003, seeking to compel it to assess the tribe's need and devise a plan to meet them. The states of Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada intervened in the suit, seeking to protect their own access to water from the Colorado River system. By the way, Bill Gates is just buying up water and farmland. As Justice Kavanaugh framed the question in the case, the tribe sought to force the federal government to take concrete steps to obtain water for it. The Navajos do not contend that the U.S. has interfered with their access to water. Rather, the Navajos argue that the U.S. must take affirmative steps to secure water for the tribe. For example, by assessing the tribe's water needs, developing a plan to secure the needed water, and potentially building pipelines, pumps, wells, and other water infrastructure. The treaty, Justice Kavanaugh concluded, did not impose such an obligation. The historical record does not suggest that the U.S. agreed to undertake affirmative efforts to secure water for the Navajos, any more than the U.S. agreed to farm land, mine minerals, harvest timber, build roads, or construct bridges on the reservation. My thing is, even if it wasn't in the original treaty, you do the right thing now. To me, that's common sense. That's how I feel about that issue. This is ridiculous. When it comes to water, you know, they have plenty of water for the people who they basically feel deserve it, the people who have the money, right? This is why they were okay. Our government's okay with people in Flint having dirty water. They were okay with people in Jackson, Mississippi having dirty water. They're okay with people in East Palestine, Ohio right now being poisoned and sick from the air. They're okay with that. Those people are poor. They don't matter to them. But to go a step further and to tell indigenous people who were here first that it is not your responsibility to make sure they have access to water. What does that tell you about this government? Think about that. Now, I do have to get going because I do have a meeting. I don't want to be late for that. But I did want to share this. I don't want to forget. We have launched the Boston chapters. So I do have the GoFundMe for the Boston RBN chapter. So we are starting to raise for that. This is the goal. The goal was $2,000. Our first event is going to be the mutual aid barbecue. So I already talked to one of the women about this, about securing the spot. It looks like I'm going to be able to get the venue for that. So I got to pay for that. And we got to pay for the food, basically. But that event will be held July 29th. It's on a Saturday. So I'm excited about that, lunchtime. But we do need your help, guys. Like, I do need to raise money to be able to do that event. And then we'll do a clothes drive and a food drive in the fall for the winter season. But we want to feed people first. So this is a way to bring community together. So if you can, I think the goal is, what's the goal? Yeah, the goal is 2,000. If you can, please donate to that GoFundMe. And then I'll also walk you guys along the way so you can see how much everything costs when I come back on Tuesday, because I already have some of the numbers written down. I just have to queue it up for you. But help us out if you can. And I'll put that there. I think I did that right. Yeah. Help us out if you can so we can get that event up and going. And yeah, that would be really, I thought I put a description here. What happened to the description? I don't like. Oh, here it is. Please help us continue mutual aid efforts for the greater Boston community. The goal is to host community events, provide food, clothing, and teaching sessions. But the sessions part, we don't need to pay for those. But I already met with the Boston volunteers. We met on Saturday morning via Zoom. So we're ready to get things rolling and going. So we have a lot of ideas and a lot of like great-minded people. And I think it's going to go great. So let's go ahead and do that. Thank you guys so much if you can help with that. And I'll be sure to put it out on social media as well. And John, to Emily, I don't know what the issue is that's going on in the chat. I don't really have time for the bullshit. I will say that. I don't know. Obviously there's people like arguing with each other in the chat. I don't have time for it. I really don't. Like, sorry. Like, let's all be adults. Anywho, all right. Gotta head out. Gotta head to a meeting. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and hit that like button. That helps me out with the algo. Off tomorrow. I will be back on Tuesday night. Until then, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.